would you like to use the sample case?
Oh, I just got it balanced right here.
Okay.
As long as I kind of got it angled up, that's
all
all
right.
that matters. So the claim I'm responding to is that individuals are converting to homosexuality as a result of social influences rather than genetics. And here's my response to those claims, that genetics actually can be a component of homosexuality, that coming out at birth and its inconsistency is not addressed correctly, and he provides irrelevant evidence and a false analogy. And that the media or the society promoting an accepting atmosphere may affect public coming out, but it does not affect private coming out. So his first claim is that genetics is unrelated to homosexuality. And then he says that two gay men or women cannot form a baby, so therefore how can they have this genetic gay gene? Well, that's not entirely true. First off, they can have kids with the assistance of in vitro fertilization or surrogate mothers or these other components, which at the end of the day means even if one of the parents is not gay, one of them still is or could be. And so technically that's one way that the gene can still be passed on. And then number two is that even before those scientific methods, there's also this idea that sometimes there are people who they get married, they have kids, things like that when they're younger, and they realize that's not really what they wanted. They were going along with it because they felt like socially it's what they were supposed to do, and they come out as gay later after they've already had kids. So sometimes it's a complicated question to answer, but at the end of the day, it's that the genetic component can be passed on through various means. And then he says that there's no test for it. Well, just because there's no test for it doesn't mean it doesn't actually exist yet. It just means that we might not have proven one yet. We don't have a proven gene yet, but that doesn't mean for certain that it doesn't exist. And then improved studies are actually happening right now. They're not finished, but the original study, the one from 1993 that first found the XQ28 gene in chromosome 8, which were the areas where they thought there was a possible gay gene, it was only 38 twins and brothers that were used in that study. And so they're doing a new one right now. It's going to have several thousand people that they've been grabbing participants since 2004. And they're saying that that one is going to be a much better representative sample. So until that one comes out, we won't know more for sure, but that's going to be a much better sample of this. So to say that just because we don't have a test or we haven't found it, it means it doesn't exist, well, we're still working on it, so there's still a possibility. Number two, second claim is that coming out does not happen at birth and is inconsistent. Well, first off, his first sub-claim for that is that pedophilia is considered a sexual disorder, and that it's about liking. So he basically is equating if a woman likes another woman or a man likes another man, it's like saying that someone who is sexually attracted to children, there happens to be some overlap, like a man liking like a small child, a male child, that somehow that we allow one, right? We allow gay behavior, but we don't allow pedophilia. That's really a false analogy. That's not comparing apples to apples. Apples to apples would be, the problem with that is that pedophilia, and the reason why we look down on that is because it's a consent issue. And if you were to do an apples to apples comparison, it would be two consenting adults in other, what we would call sexually strange or sexually deviant behavior. That would actually be a fair comparison. He's not making a fair comparison with the pedophilia argument. And that and he also makes this claim that gender identity is different from sexual preference. And yeah, that's true, they actually are. And to compare the two again is sort of this false analogy, because his claim is essentially that those who believe being gay is not a choice also believe that gender is a choice, and how absurd that sounds, right? Oh, if you can change your gender, then you should be able to logically change your sex, right? Well, they're not the same thing. Again, it's trying to make this argument sound absurd by comparing it to something that's not really the same thing. Gender identity and sexual preference are not the same. They're actually different. And he even admits that in his definition, with that claim, with his second claim, that coming out does not happen at birth is inconsistent. One of his subpoints is that those two things are different. So to compare the two like that, I don't feel like that's a very good correlation to make, or a good cause and effect. And third, that there are many factors that influence sexual orientation. Well, yes, there are. And I'm not here to make the claim that homosexuality, that as soon as there's the gene, because his claim is that individuals are converting to homosexuality as a result of social influences rather than genetics, and that the genetic component isn't really there, it's mostly a social thing. I'm saying that the social component plays a part in addition to the genetic component. And the idea that the outside factors influence it, yes, they do. But that's also one of the reasons why finding the gay gene is so difficult, because trying to isolate for those social variables, when they take twins, when they take these different groups of people, they can't really isolate for those social variables or those complications of kids growing up in the same household with similar parents and similar values and all that. They can't isolate for those variables, and that's the problem. So we're still working on the data, but this idea that the environment doesn't play a part, it does, but it's not the only part. And then there's this definition of coming out or realizing one's homosexuality. It's either to themselves or publicly. And then he makes this claim that the acceptability of homosexuality somehow makes it more or less likely to occur, that if the media says it's okay, or if TV or all these different things say it's okay, if it's acceptable in the community, more people are going to come out. But all that does is affect public coming out, not private coming out. And so then what happens is that there are a lot of people that still privately come out to themselves, but then they don't come out in the open because they're afraid of what might happen. So it's not like just because the society is more accepting, there's going to suddenly be a lot more gay people around. You'll just know that there's more, but there actually are more than likely, we can't tell for sure, but there's more than likely the same amount, they just don't want to say anything. And one of the biggest examples of that is Utah is one of those examples where the Church of Latter-day Saints is there, and they're incredibly, and that's one of their home base essentially is there. The church is founded there, all these different things, and they're extremely, they're very aggressive about going after their laws and everything. They don't really protect gay individuals very much. And one of the things about that is that they have one of the highest suicide rates of 10 to 17-year-olds. And the other statistic for that is that LGBT young adults are 8 times as likely to have attempted suicide if they felt they were rejected by their parents. The church in that state passed a law that said that to be accepted in the church, these children have to renounce their own parents. And that's something that, in a community like that it does have these very underlying anti-LGBT things going on. It's not that there's not gay people, it's that they're just choosing not to come out or they're killing themselves. So, my claims were that genetics can be a component of homosexuality, that coming out at birth and its inconsistency is not correctly addressed and provides irrelevant evidence and a false analogy, and that the media or society promoting an accepting atmosphere may affect public coming out, but it does not affect private coming out, which is a different matter entirely.
All right, well, you clearly responded to the advocate's arguments. You had a lot of analysis, and there's a lot of reasoning that goes into this. You're challenging the way the advocate's reasoning, suggesting the comparisons they're making are illegitimate. You give us comparative arguments that you try to explain and do a reasonable job on. Sometimes you're relying on hypothetical examples to illustrate that point. The one thing that I think is missing substantially from the argument is additional evidence to support the positions that you're taking, but I think the underlying analysis and reasoning challenges that you're making seem very reasonable. The example that you have at the end about the rate of suicides of kids in places like Utah where homosexuality is significantly frowned upon suggests, in fact, that people remain closeted because of social issues, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't gay to begin with. I thought that was maybe the strongest part of your evidence. The reasoning that you had on the other points was a little bit clearer, but I think I understand the reasoning that you're making there. I think you do a very nice job speaking to the audience and trying to explain things, and that helps go a long way toward building some ethos. All right, thank you.